what I'm going to share with you today is something that I found extremely valuable. And I don't know if you're familiar with the phrase that what's really important is what you learn after you get your education. So this is the type of stuff I learned in industry, and this is something that's really hidden, and it's kind of high level. So I'm going to go through this real fast. This is part of a training package, and it's an introduction to a section where I get the group together to work. So I'm going to go through it very fast, if you don't mind.
That's
But
fine.
we're going to talk about that.
We're not seeing your slides.
No.
So you need to share your screen, if you will.
All right, let's try that again then. Screen.
Okay.
I could see his slides.
Oh, you can
Weird.
see his slide. I just can't.
Until they went away.
All right. I did too, and then they disappeared. So try again, will you, Dave?
Okay, can everybody see my slide?
Yes.
It says overview.
Yes, I see it.
Function analysis and fast. Okay, and the fast modeling is not fast, not quick. But what it does is most organizations want to put together flowcharts, and they talk about the activities that occur in a organization. And this is an attempt to look at a function. And the way they decide or define the function is the intent or purpose, as opposed to the actual action that occurs. Now, one of the things that I advocate, I don't care what you're doing, if you're doing function mapping or if you're doing activity mapping, use an active verb and a measurable noun. Or if you're a statistician, it would be a quantifiable noun. But use a verb noun framework. It's difficult to do, it's hard, it takes a lot of practice, but it's always well worth the effort to do that. So the question is, since we're going to talk about function now and not necessarily action, what is the function of a pencil? Now, when I do this as a group, I go through the whole process of having people shout out to me, but I'm going to keep it short. Most people will say something about the function of a pencil is to write a letter, collect data, fill out a form, whatever the case may be. However, that is actually the action that occurs. So we have the action of the function, and we're trying to go up to a higher level of abstraction and go into the function or the intent of the pencil. Now I'm sorry, I forgot to tell you, we are a pencil manufacturing company. So Acme Pencil. As Jan pointed out, I did a little thing a while back on used the cartoon characters from my childhood TV shows, and Acme comes, of course, from the Bugs Bunny Roadrunner and Wile E. Coyote arena. So we can say, I'm going back to the slide here again, we can say that the action is to write a letter, but at the higher level of abstraction, the function of a pencil is actually to make marks. Now, if we start looking at how we manufacture this pencil at the make marks level, we can define subgroups of various aspects of that pencil. We can determine what is the function of the eraser. What's the function of the band? Now, the band is the metal part between the eraser and the wood body. But what's the function of the body? What's the function of the paint? Or how about the function of the lead? So if, like I said, during a workshop, I make people actually go through this, but this is how it turns out. The eraser, the verb is remove marks. The band is to secure the eraser and improve the appearance. The body has 4 functions: support lead, transmit, torque, because that's actually how you make the marks, is by dragging the tip across abrasion action. So you transmit the torque. Accommodate grip, display info, you go on and on and on. Those are all secondary functions. We have base functions. And if we were really in the company of company of making these pencils, we want to know what was the cost of each one of these functions. And we could go through and fill in the cost. So now that we've identified what are all the functions that this pencil is intended to do, we then want to map out the relationship of these functions to each other. Now, what I ask people to do is to say, we put these functions, verb noun functions, on a Post-it. I'm a consultant. Post-its are great. They go everywhere. And then we put them up on a wall, and we try to create the relationship between these different functions. In this case, we have, and the way we do this so that it makes sense is we have one function that we're talking about. It's the intent, and it's in the normal state. If you've ever been around engineers, they always like to talk about exceptions. So I always tell them, no, this is in its normal state. Let's forget the exceptions. We'll address those separately, but this is in the normal state. And on the right is the method function, and on the left is the goal. So on the right is what function is necessary to accomplish this, and then on the left is why are you doing this function? So why it's done. So, and what I usually do at this point is have people go up and create this on the wall, and they really don't understand it until they actually try to do this for a pencil. But you can see that when you organize this, the center line here, the main line is it supports sled, accommodates grip, transmit torque, make marks, and also removes marks, but makes marks, and then recording data is outside the scope of the company. So we're in the pencil making business. So you can see over here on the far right is that when you support your lead, you're also securing the eraser. When you protect the wood, and then you display the info and proof. Now the test that I had before was, let's start with transmit torque. So you can see how do you transmit torque as you accommodate grip, and why do you transmit torque? You make marks. And people you do this for each one. Why do you accommodate grip? It's transmit torque. How do you accommodate grip? You support the lead. So when this is all done, people have a better understanding of what is the function of what we're studying or what the company makes. Now, I come from manufacturing, so I use this example, and I work with engineers. So I make this example as the training part of it. Now, not all organizations are making something. This is a fast model, function analysis systems technique that's used for customer service. It was a consulting organization inside of a very large corporation, but it was a consulting group that was trying to help different departments. And can you read this, or is it too small to read?
No, it's readable. It's a
readable,
little small.
So, yeah, you can see how this works. You develop a knowledge base. Why do you develop a knowledge base? So you can advertise knowledge. Why do you advertise knowledge? So you can attract a prospect. Now you can go backwards too. It says, how do you attract a prospect? You advertise knowledge. How do you advertise knowledge? You develop a knowledge base. So, and this took to get to this level, it usually takes about 8 hours, so that you know what's going on. And then from there, you can also build it further. Oh, let me back up a second. If you'll notice that the flow chart runs backwards to how most flow charts are written, because they're usually written from the details parts on the left to the end result on the right. We do it backwards. And the only specific reason we do it that way is that so nobody can game the system as we're creating this thing. Because people are not used to writing in America. People are not used to writing and thinking from right to left. In other parts of the world, if I was going to do this in other parts of the world where the writing normally occurs right to left, I'd probably reverse it just to make it backwards. It makes it harder to read. So now we have this fast model, function analysis systems technique model. And we know the major functions and the main path. So now we can go and identify the different departments or activities or functions that occur inside the company, or in this case, inside the department. They've identified these special areas, and a special shout out to Jan, because marketing and sales are separate.
Thank you.
And this diagram is over 20 years old, so I've been that way for a long time. Sales and marketing are different. And what they do is they map out, you can see that the advertised knowledge addresses this function up at the top. So they've got the main functions. And the little dots show this is the person responsible. The solid dot is the department that's responsible for that function. The clear circles those are the people that need to be notified. They need to know what's going on. And what's really critical, or what's really useful with this form, is that you have to make sure that somebody somewhere in the organization is responsible for every one of those functions. You cannot have a function up here that has nobody responsible for it. The guy that taught me this technique used it for helping refurbish primary school buildings in New York City. And he brought all the trade services in. They created this map of how do you actually refurbish like an elementary school. And everybody agreed this is how it's done. So then they started putting on who is involved: electricians, plumbers, project managers, whoever. And when they said, okay, now who's responsible and who needs to be informed for each one of these functions, what they found out was nobody was responsible for anything. Nobody was responsible for many of these functions. And they said, well, maybe that's not the way it should be run. Maybe you ought to actually assign somebody responsibility, and everybody else look for that person to be responsible for that function and gear your work off of them. And what he did was the building took originally 3 years to build. It took like 6 years to refurbish it because nobody was responsible for any of the functions. And after they did this and assigned the functions out and everybody agreed to it, then it took about 1.5 years to refurbish a school. So there's major improvements when you identify who is doing what. Let's see, what do I got? Oh, and this is what it kind of looks like when you do one of these workshops. A lot of stuff on the walls. Most consultants understand this type of work. But this is a bunch of aerospace engineers doing something with aerospace. And that's all I've got.
Well, Dave, you are wonderful. And Genevieve, does some of that look familiar, like what we did in class?
Yeah, definitely. It's really in depth, which is what I like. It's really good, and I think it's super cool. How do you can I ask you a question, Mr.
You
Dave?
bet.
So you deal with a lot of different industries. How do you know, like, because you're guiding them to place, the different tasks that they have to do, like for customer service, it's kind of, I feel like that's pretty probably common in a lot of different industries. But is there some, models or like this FAST model that you're doing for a company where it's difficult to know what each, I guess, area would be, or function, I should say, and how that works because you're dealing with so many different industries, and then who's responsible? Like, how does that work? I don't know if I'm asking the right question, but
No, that's a good. What I've done is I've showed you the training part that takes about 8 hours for them to actually get to the point where you see it now on the screen. And it's a 3-day workshop. So the first part of the workshop is having the managers come in. Well, and pre-workshop, you talk with the sponsors and find out where are the scope lines and what is it we're going to talk about.
oh,
And then you have them come in and present it to this group, which is a diverse group of people. And then it's up to the group to decide at what level of abstraction, how many of these functions do we want to talk about? There's an awful lot of stopping, starting, and doing it over again. That's why we use Post-its on a wall and you only use pencil to connect them. So we can, because it changes a lot. And it has to be a lot of flexibility during the workshop.
So Dave, I have a question for Joyce. So Joyce, these are examples of stakeholders that he's talked about here. So that's kind of an answer for you. But as a one person with your errands service, can you see how this might be helpful to make your point about how many people it really takes to do those quote unquote little errands that need to be done, that could be done with you, making sure that all the right people were involved and engaged?
Yeah, because if they went through this, then they would know where they needed to delegate to a certain individual, I would think. So at least it would give the notion of delegating, and I think that would be helpful.
And I think Genevieve's comment about the remodeler thing about asking the right questions
Yes.
fits right in here too. So Dave, once again, you're taking the monkey off our back. We appreciate it. So Lisa, would you like to make a comment about what you've heard?
I would. And the one thing I wanted to point out, which is really where I'm going to start with, is the Dave's big yellow arrow that says why. And then also in the picture that he shared in the presentation on the wall, the first thing that jumped out was why, with a blue written in blue and blue arrow. And you know, that is really where it all starts, isn't it? Right? And you know, I don't know, Dave, what your comment would be, but you know, one of the things I wondered when you talked about the pencil company was, you know, what was the why that drove the company into existence and through its journey as a business?
Oh, and those are very good questions. It's a very good way to set up the workshop to help these diverse people focus on why are we here? Yeah,
Right.
I didn't address those questions at the beginning. This was more the mechanics.
Yeah, yeah. But it sounds like you agree, though, that is the starting point, right? And that's where you begin to get alignment on this very diverse group of people to whom you referred, so that you can, you know, start in a productive way to pull these things apart and to, you know, to focus on all of the other things you shared. So that was excellent. Thank you.
Yeah, and that's extremely important to successful workshops, is that part of it at the beginning.
Oh, yeah.
This group, this pictures that I showed you, there's a bunch of different engineering groups, aerospace engineers, and I don't know if you've worked with engineers, but they're usually pretty set in their ways. They have strong opinions. And so we have to break them out of their silos and stop thinking about what's best for their department and what's best for the entire organization, what's best to achieve the goal. How do we work together?
And that's really a good point. And it's certainly something that Genevieve deals with when she deals with all the trades who tend to do that same thing. And certainly in education, we have a lot of silos we need to break down.